Alright then, we're on to the next part of the Iron Man. We're just going to finish off a little bit the last chapter, and then, well, there's about half of the book still left. Let's just take a look where we were a moment ago. So, there, cried Hogarth. Eat all you can. We see Iron Man there, surrounded by some aeroplanes, cars, utilities in our houses, washing machines, fridges, prams, bikes. The Iron Man gazed, and his eyes turned red. He kneeled down in the yard. He stretched out on one elbow. He picked up a greasy black stove, that's like an oven where we do our cooking, and he chewed it like a toffee. There were delicious crumbs of chrome on it. He followed that with a double-decker bedstead, and the brass knobs made his eyes crackle with joy. Never before had the Iron Man eaten such delicacies. As he lay there, a big truck turned into the yard and unloaded a pile of rusty chain. The Iron Man lifted a handful and let it dangle in his mouth, better than any spaghetti. And so there they left him. It was an Iron Man's heaven. The farmers went back to their farms. Hogarth visited the Iron Man every few days. Now the Iron Man's eyes were constantly a happy blue. He was no longer rusty. His body gleamed blue like a new gun barrel. And he ate endlessly. The end. Nearly? Is it? Hogarth is happy. The farmers are all happy. The Iron Man is really happy. But we have a new chapter, and this chapter is called The Space Being and the Iron Man. And up here in the night sky, there's a little hole in the paper, a hole that is there on purpose, cut by the illustrator. Something new and quite different is about to happen. Let's take a look. One day there came strange news. Everybody was talking about it. Round eyes, busy mouths, frightened voices, everybody was talking about it. One of the stars of the night sky had begun to change. This star had always been a very tiny star of no importance at all. It had shone up there for billions and trillions and zillions of years in the constellation of Orion. The constellation of Orion? Listen a bit more. You can see this every night, even in London in the night sky. The constellation of Orion was that great shape of the giant hunter that strides across space on autumn and wintry nights. In all its time, this tiny star had never changed in any way. Now, suddenly, it began to get bigger. Astronomers, peering through their telescopes, noticed it first. They watched it with worried frowns. That tiny star was definitely getting bigger, and not just bigger, but bigger and bigger and bigger, big capital letters there, and each night it was bigger, all capital letters. Bigger than the dog star, the large coloured twinkler at the heel of the hunter Orion. You can see just someone at the bottom staring up in the night sky from their bike. Maybe Hogarth? Right, next page. Bigger. Bigger than Jupiter, the great blazing planet. Everybody could see it clearly. Night after night, as it grew and grew and grew, they stared up with frightened faces. Look, the whole sky is becoming brighter now as this star gets closer. Till at last it hung there in the sky over the world, blazing down, the size of the moon, a deep gloomy red. And now there could only be one explanation. That star was getting bigger because it was getting nearer and nearer and nearer and nearer. It was rushing towards the world, faster than a bullet, faster than any rocket, faster even than a meteorite, one of those rocks that crashes in space. And if it hit the world at that speed, why, the whole world would simply be blasted to bits in the twinkling of an eye. It would be like an express train hitting a bowl of goldfish. So the people of the world, looking up into the night sky, they're seeing this giant red burning object heading closer and closer towards them, as big as the moon now. But we can get a glimpse of what it is through the picture for our first time. And again. No wonder the people stared up with frightened faces. No wonder the astronomers watched it through their telescopes with worried frowns. But all of a sudden, a strange thing. The star seemed to have stopped. There it hung, a deep and gloomy red, just the size of the moon. It got no smaller, it got no bigger. It wasn't coming any nearer, but it wasn't going away either. Now, everybody tried to explain why and how this was, what had happened, what was happening, what was going to happen. And now it was that the next strange thing occurred. The astronomers noticed it first. In the middle of the giant star, a tiny black speck appeared. On the second night, this speck was seen to be wriggling and much bigger. And on the third night, you could see it without a telescope, a struggling black speck in the center of that red, gloomy giant star. On the fifth night, the astronomers saw that it seemed to be either a bat or a black angel or a flying lizard, a dreadful silhouette, flying out at the center of that giant star straight towards the earth. What was coming out of the giant star? Each night when the telescopes returned to their telescopes to peer up, this black flying horror was bigger, with slow gigantic wing beats, with long slow writhings of its body. It was coming through space, outlined black against its red star, and we can see more of it now in the picture. There it is, it has arrived. Within a few more nights, its shape had completely blotted out the red star. The nameless, immense bat angel was flying down at the earth like a great black swan. It was definitely coming straight at the earth. It took several days to cover the distance. Then, for one awful night, its wings seemed to be filling most of the sky. The moon peered fearfully from low on the skyline, and all the people of Earth stayed up, gazing in fear at the huge black movement of wings that filled the night. Can you imagine? The next morning, it landed in Australia. Right, Australia, that's where I was born. We can see Australia on the Earth just there. England all the way around here on the other side of the Earth. Don't think we can quite see it there. Oh, my globe not working. England at the top there. Australia around here. So you can see how big a continent Australia is. This dragon is going to sit on Australia. Brump! The shock of its landing rolled around the earth like an earthquake. It was spilling teacups in London, knocking pictures off the wall in California, cracking statues off their pedestals in Russia. The thing had actually landed, and it was a terrific dragon. Terribly dark, terribly scaly, terribly knobbly, terribly horned, terribly hairy. Imagine drawing this. Terribly clawed, terribly fanged, with vast, indescribably terrible eyes, each one as big as the country Switzerland. There it sat, covering the whole of Australia, its tail trailing away over Tasmania into the sea. That's where I was born as well. Its foreclaws on the headlands of the Gulf of Carpentaria, so its whole body is stretching right across Australia from the south to the north. Luckily, the mountains and the hills propped its belly up clear of the valleys, and the Australians could still move around in the pitch darkness under this new sky, this low queer covering of scales. So the Australians don't get squashed, that's good. But otherwise, this is pretty bad news. Of course, whoever had been on a mountaintop when the dragon had landed, they had been squashed flat. Nothing could be done about them, and there the horror sat, glaring out over the countries of the world. What it had come for. What was going to happen to the world now this monstrosity had arrived? Everybody waited. The newspapers spoke about nothing else. Aircraft flew near this space bat angel dragon, taking photographs. It lay over Australia higher than any mountains, even higher than the Hindu Kush in Asia, and its head alone was the size of Italy. For a whole day, while the people of the earth trembled and wept and prayed to God to save them, the space bat angel dragon lay resting, its chin sunk in the Indian Ocean, the sea not coming quite up to its bottom lip. But the next morning, early, its giant voice came rumbling around the world. The space bat angel dragon was speaking. It wanted to be fed. And what it wanted to eat was living things. People, animals, forests. It didn't care which, so long as the food was alive, but it had better be fed quickly, otherwise it would roll out its tongue longer than the Trans-Siberian Railway. That's the railway that goes right across the world's biggest country, Russia. There, so going right across, that's how long its tongue is, and it would do that to lick huge swathes of life off the surface of the earth, cities, forests, farmlands, whatever there was. It would leave the world looking like a charred pebble unless it was fed, and fed quickly. Its voice shook and rumbled across the earth for a whole hour as it delivered its message. Finally it ended and lay waiting. The peoples of the world got together. If they fed it, how could they ever satisfy it? It would never be full, and every new day it would be as hungry as ever. How can you feed a beast the size of Australia? Australia is a vast land. All the countries of Europe would easily fit into Australia. The monster's stomach alone must be the size of Germany. No, they would not feed it. The people of the world decided they would not feed this space bat angel dragon or whatever it was. They would fight it. They would declare war on it, and they would all get together to blast it off the face of the earth. So, ready for the war of the world against the space bat angel dragon? Yeah, we got a little bit closer there. And so it was that all the peoples of the earth declared war on the monster, and they sent out their armed forces in a grand, combined operation. What a terrific attack! So there we can see the armies of the world, all attacking the monster at once from all sides. We've got the ships, the air force with navies, the helicopters, horses going to be much use, paratroopers, tanks, rockets, projectiles of all sorts, missiles and bombs, shells and flamethrowers. Everything was tried. The smoke of the explosions drifted out over the Pacific Ocean like a black crawling continent. The noise of the battle shook the world almost as much as the landing of the dragon had done, and for much longer. And then the noise died down, and the smoke cleared, and the peoples of the world cried in dismay. The dragon was actually smiling. Smiling! Aircraft flying daringly near photographed the vast face smiling, and the picture was in all the papers. It was smiling as if it had been well tickled. Now the peoples of the world were worried. They were all great fighters, all spent their spare money on preparing for wars, always making bigger and better weapons, and now they had all tried their utmost to blast this thing off the earth, and what was the result? The dragon merely smiled. Not a scratch could be seen anywhere on its body. Human weapons had no effect on it. But that wasn't surprising. The creature had come from the depths of space, out of the heart of a star. Nobody knew it was made of. Perhaps it could not be destroyed by any means whatsoever. And now the space bat angel dragon spoke again. It gave the peoples of the world 1 week in which to prepare its first meal. They could prepare what they liked, said the dragon, but if the meal was not ready in a week, then he would start on the cities and the towns. The peoples of the earth, the kings, the presidents and ministers, the farmers and the factory workers and the office workers began to lament. Now what would happen to them? They would like to say the monster didn't exist, but how could they? There it was, covering Australia, staring out over all the countries of the world. Now the little boy Hogarth heard about all this. Everybody in the world was talking about it, worrying about it. He was sure the Iron Man could do something. Compared to the Space Bat Angel Dragon, the Iron Man wasn't very big, of course. The Iron Man was only the size of a tall tree. Nevertheless, Hogarth had faith in the Iron Man. He visited the Iron Man in his scrap yard and talked to him about this great monster that was threatening the Earth. "Please," he asked, "please, can't you think of some way of getting rid of it? If you can't, then it's the end of us all." The Iron Man chewed thoughtfully at his favourite tidbit, a juicy, spicy old gas stove. He shook his head slowly. "Please think of something," cried Hogarth. "If this Space Bat Angel Dragon licks all life off the Earth, that will be the end of your scrap iron. There'll be no people left to make it." The Iron Man became still. He seemed to be thinking. Suddenly his headlamps blazed red, green, blue, and white all at once, and he stood up. In a great grinding voice, he gave his commands. Hogarth danced for joy. The Iron Man had had the most stupendous idea. The Iron Man would go out as the champion of the Earth against this monster from space. The next chapter is the Iron Man's Challenge. If you've seen the movie The Iron Giant, you'll know by this stage that this book goes in a very different direction, and the movie really tried to change the ending. So that's why we're still saying save the movie for a bit longer, because the book is about to go somewhere different. They're both excellent, but the book is going to be a little bit different for now. All right then. I think Ms. Lopez will be reading about the Iron Man's Challenge with you very soon. Speak to you guys soon. Bye-bye.